Remember when London Mayor Sadiq Khan publicly told his own constituents, the very people of London, to get used to Islamic terrorism? The entirety of the right wing lashed out on him, vilifying him as a globalist, Islamist, terrorist apologist. But I can't help but think he had a point. Within the United Kingdom, there are 3 million Muslims. According to the NOP, a market research company, 1 in 4 British Muslims say the 7/7 bombings were justified, which means 750,000 Muslims think the bombings were justified. That figure alone is pretty darn scary. And if that's all we knew about Muslims, then it wouldn't be surprising that some would become terrorists, considering that some of them think terrorism is justified. But if you dig a little deeper, you start to see just how far the rabbit hole goes. ICM polling data, for example, indicates that roughly 25% of British Muslims think that a Muslim has no obligation to report terrorists to the police. In addition, 27% of British Muslims do not support the deportation of Islamic extremists preaching hatred and violence within the UK. So according to the data, a sizable amount of British Muslims, not a majority of all Muslims, but a large amount of Muslims, seem to think that it's okay for Islamists to preach violence and hatred within the UK. And more so, if someone wants to do what they've been preached at, many wouldn't report that terrorist wannabe to the police. That's beyond pretty scary. That's absolutely terrifying. To think that so many people live within the UK think that way. But alas, I'm just getting started. BBC Radio, 45% of British Muslims agree that Muslim clerics preaching violence against the West represent, quote, mainstream Islam. So almost a majority of them think that hating the Western world is mainstream, and yet these people still want to live within the UK. 18% of British Muslims would be proud or indifferent if a family member joined Al-Qaeda. 1.5 million British Muslims support the ultimate goals of the Islamic State, nearly half. 28% of Muslims in the UK prefer Sharia law. 11% of British Muslims find violence for religious or political ends acceptable. 8% of British Muslims say that violence is acceptable against people who, quote, mock the Prophet. And by mock the Prophet, I mean mock Muhammad. Only 4% of Muslims within the UK say that it should even be legal to publish a picture of Muhammad. 78% say it should be banned. 12% say it all depends. So I guess those are the moderate Muslims. But that's right. Most say it shouldn't even be legal. Others say violence against those who publish it should be acceptable. Indeed, these are the types of beliefs that lead to the Charlie Hebdo attacks. In fact, following the Charlie Hebdo attacks, 27% of British Muslims openly support violence against cartoonists. Another 8% would not say, meaning that only 2 of 3 surveyed would say that killings were not justified. These are the people who live within the UK, and they can't just flat out say, I stand up for free speech, I'm against violence. 27% of British Muslims. That's 810,000 Muslims. That many British Muslim people are against the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression and support religious violence. That many British Muslim people either need to radically change their beliefs or get the hell out of the UK. So many right-wingers give Sadiq Khan crap for saying get used to terrorism, but lay off him a bit. Look at these numbers. These people live within the UK. So yes, if nearly half of them are going to support the ultimate goal of ISIS, of course we're going to see a lot more terrorism within the UK. The way I see it, on the surface, what he said was clearly bad. But it could be that he was simply telling us the truth about Islam in the UK. It could be that he's telling us the truth about his very own people and his very own religion. Many have backwards, regressive beliefs. Since they all live within the UK, thanks to mass unrestrained immigration, a lot of them may go into terrorism. So the cold, hard truth is, we just have to get used to terrorism. We have to get used to living in a world where terrorism is a common occurrence. We're the ones who accepted them into the countries in the first place, after all. And if you didn't want them, you shouldn't have let them in. So maybe that's what Sadiq Khan meant to say when he said what he said. Maybe. As the London mayor, I hope he never gets used to terrorism. I'm Fayza from TheRebel.media. If you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed my critical analysis of Islam within the UK, like, subscribe to TheRebel.media.